Before we begin, I want you to consider something that most people never stop to think about. Your entire life is shaped by the things you avoid, the conversations you avoid, the goals you avoid, the habits you avoid, the discomfort you avoid. And the truth is, every dream you've ever had is sitting on the other side of the very things you keep running from. Today, I'm not here to motivate you temporarily. I'm here to help you rewire the part of your brain that keeps you playing small. I'm here to show you how to turn struggle into strength, how to turn hesitation into hunger, and how to turn hard things into the very things you start to crave. If you stay with me till the end, you won't just understand why your brain fights you. You'll learn how to make it work for you. This message might feel uncomfortable, but so is every breakthrough you've ever had in your life. And if you give me your attention, I promise you'll walk away seeing yourself differently. Let's begin. Your brain follows the path of least resistance because it was built for survival, not greatness. It's designed to conserve energy, avoid discomfort, and repeat whatever feels familiar. That's why when you try to take on something challenging, even something you want to achieve, your mind pushes back. It whispers excuses, creates doubt, and offers you the quick escape of comfort. It isn't trying to sabotage your life, it's simply trying to protect you from anything uncertain. The problem is everything meaningful in your life exists in that space your brain tries to avoid. Understanding this changes everything. You stop blaming yourself for procrastinating or hesitating. You stop telling yourself you're weak or unmotivated. You realize that the instant pull toward the easier option is a biological reflex, not a personal failure. Your brain is doing its job, but now it becomes your job to teach it a new one. If you want growth, transformation, or discipline, you'll need to override that automatic response and show your mind that discomfort is not danger. Most people lose this battle because they think motivation should come first. They believe they should feel ready, confident, or inspired before taking action. But your brain won't reward you with motivation until it sees evidence that effort leads somewhere worthwhile. That's why starting is always the hardest part. You're pushing against millions of years of evolution that tells you, stay where it's safe. Yet the irony is that staying safe is the very thing that keeps you stuck. But once you understand this wiring, you gain power over it. You can separate your identity from your instinct. You can feel that internal resistance and still choose to move forward. You can see discomfort as a sign of growth instead of a threat. Every time you choose the harder option, even for a moment, you teach your brain that the unfamiliar isn't dangerous. You teach it that challenge can be rewarding. You teach it that effort builds a better life than comfort ever will. This process is slow at first because your brain doesn't trust you yet. It wants proof. It wants repetition. But the more you show up, the more the wiring begins to shift. What once felt impossible becomes normal. What once triggered fear becomes a feeling of progress. Eventually, the hard things start giving you a rush, not because they got easier, but because your mind finally understands that they lead somewhere meaningful. And that's the moment everything changes. The path of least resistance no longer controls your choices. You stop living on autopilot. You stop running from the very things that could transform you. You start craving the work because you've retrained your brain to prefer growth over comfort. And once you reach that point, effort isn't something you fear. It's something you rely on, something you trust, and something that pulls you forward into the life you were meant to build. Most people wait for motivation to change their lives. But motivation is unreliable. It shows up when things feel easy and disappears the moment something becomes uncomfortable. Relying on motivation is like relying on weather. It changes without warning. The real force that drives long-term action is identity. You act in alignment with who you believe you are, not what you feel in the moment. When you see yourself as someone who struggles, you act like someone who struggles. When you see yourself as someone who avoids discomfort, you avoid discomfort. But when you begin to shift your internal identity, even in small ways, your actions start to follow that new direction automatically. Identity is the root, behavior is the fruit. Most people don't realize this. They try to change their actions without changing their self-perception, and it never lasts. If deep down you believe you're inconsistent, every attempt to be disciplined will feel forced and temporary. If deep down you believe you're not capable of big change, every step forward will feel like a battle against yourself. But the moment you claim a new identity, even before you fully believe it, everything begins to shift. When you tell yourself, I'm someone who shows up, your brain searches for ways to prove that true. When you say, I'm the kind of person who keeps promises to myself, your behavior starts to align because your mind hates conflict between identity and action. Identity creates internal pressure to act consistently with your self-concept. This is why small wins matter so much. Every time you make a choice that reflects the person you want to become, You strengthen that new identity. You build trust with yourself. You build credibility. You build a new internal narrative. You stop fighting your old habits and start becoming someone who doesn't need to fight them anymore because they no longer match who you are. When you see yourself as the type of person who does hard things, the resistance you once felt begins to fade. You don't negotiate with fear. You don't argue with discomfort. You don't debate whether you feel like it today. You act because that is simply who you are. The mistake people make is assuming identity must come after achievement. They think they need to succeed first, then identify as successful. But the truth is reversed. Identity comes first. Action follows. Results come last. You don't wait to become disciplined. You decide to be disciplined and let your actions catch up. You don't wait to feel capable. You act capable until your brain has no choice but to accept the new reality. Every step you take reinforces the shift. Every choice you make builds a layer of identity. Every moment of effort rewrites what you believe about yourself. Eventually, motivation becomes irrelevant because you're no longer dragging yourself forward. You're being pulled forward by who you believe you are. That is the ultimate power, becoming a person whose actions are automatic because they match your internal truth. When identity leads the way, effort feels natural, consistency feels normal, and doing hard things becomes part of your nature instead of a struggle against it. Your brain is constantly searching for reward, and the chemical that signals reward is dopamine. Most people unknowingly train their brain to crave shortcuts, distractions, and instant gratification because those things deliver quick bursts of dopamine with zero effort. Scrolling, snacking, postponing difficult tasks, avoiding discomfort. These behaviors become addictive not because they're good for you, but because they create easy dopamine. Meanwhile, the things that actually build your life, studying, exercising, working on goals, building discipline, start to feel dull, draining, and heavy because your brain hasn't linked them to any immediate reward. This is why most people don't crave hard things. Their brain simply hasn't been taught that effort is meaningful. But the human brain is adaptable. It rewires based on what you repeatedly reinforce. When you start creating small wins, your brain begins to associate effort with progress. And progress, even tiny progress, creates a dopamine response. This is the key to transformation. When you focus on micro wins, you build a new feedback loop. Effort leads to achievement. Achievement releases dopamine. Dopamine motivates more effort. You train your brain to enjoy the feeling of earning something instead of the feeling of escaping something. You break the addiction to easy rewards and replace it with a craving for meaningful ones. The shift starts small. When you take one step instead of 10, your brain experiences success instead of overwhelm. One paragraph written instead of the entire chapter. 5 minutes of exercise instead of a full workout. One drawer cleaned instead of the whole room. The size of the action doesn't matter. The signal it sends to your brain does. Each micro win says, I follow through. And every time you follow through, your brain rewards you. That reward is the fuel you need to keep going. You don't wait for motivation. Motivation is generated by action, not the other way around. Most people fail because they aim too big too fast. They set massive goals, get overwhelmed, quit, and then label themselves incapable. But they weren't incapable. They were untrained. Their brain didn't have the wiring to support the change they wanted. Micro wins create this wiring. They build neural pathways that tell your brain, hard things lead to good outcomes. Over time, you stop resisting the work and start craving the momentum. You feel pulled toward progress rather than pushed by pressure. This process builds confidence at a deep level. You stop chasing perfection and start chasing consistency. You stop being afraid of difficult tasks because you've taught your brain that even the hardest things can be broken into simple, winnable steps. Every small victory becomes proof that you're capable. And when you feel capable, you act capable. Eventually, hard things stop feeling like punishment. They start feeling like purpose. The discomfort that once scared you now signals growth. The effort that once drained you now energizes you. You've trained your brain to crave the feeling of moving forward, even if the steps are small. That is how transformation becomes permanent, by stacking tiny wins until effort becomes your new source of reward. People often mistake their lack of progress for a lack of motivation, when in reality the issue is usually a lack of clarity. Your brain isn't afraid of effort, it's afraid of not knowing what to do next. When something feels confusing, overwhelming, or uncertain, your mind treats it as a threat. Confusion triggers hesitation. Overwhelm triggers avoidance. Not because you're lazy or uncommitted, but because your brain is wired to pull you away from anything that feels unpredictable. That's why even important goals are so easy to delay. The desire is there, but the direction is not. Without direction, emotion takes over, and emotion almost always chooses the easier road. Most people assume their emotions are the enemy, but the real enemy is ambiguity. When a task is vague, your mind fills the empty space with fear, doubt, and resistance. That mental fog becomes heavier than the work itself. The task isn't too big, the lack of clarity is. Once you define exactly what needs to be done, the emotional weight dissolves. Your brain relaxes because it understands the path. Fear shrinks when the next step is clear. This is why so many people feel anxious before starting something but calm once they begin. Action brings certainty. Certainty quiets the mind. Clarity turns intimidating goals into manageable actions. When you break a task down into simple, specific steps, you eliminate the unknowns your brain is trying to protect you from. Suddenly the work feels smaller, lighter, and more doable. You no longer feel like you're standing at the bottom of a mountain staring at the peak. You're simply taking one step at a time. And that single step is enough to activate momentum. Momentum is powerful because it overrides emotion. Once you're moving, your mind shifts from protection mode to progress mode. You stop fighting yourself and start cooperating with the process. The truth is, most avoidance is not emotional weakness. It's a lack of structure. People don't quit because they can't handle effort. They quit because they don't understand the effort. When you don't know where to begin, you assume it's too hard. When you create clarity, you realize it's just unfamiliar. And the moment unfamiliar becomes clear, it becomes possible. Your brain stops resisting because it finally knows what to do. Clarity builds confidence. Every defined step you complete becomes proof that you're capable. Each small action reduces fear, reduces overwhelm, and replaces confusion with competence. And competence feels good. It fuels pride, energy, and direction. That emotional shift is what makes hard things feel less intimidating and more engaging. You begin to crave the feeling of knowing exactly what needs to be done and seeing yourself execute it. As clarity increases, internal chaos decreases. You stop drowning in thoughts and start moving with intention. You stop wasting energy thinking about the work and start using energy doing the work. The mental fog that once held you back becomes a clear path forward. And once that path is visible, your brain no longer pulls you away from hard things. It follows you toward them because clarity turns challenge into certainty, and certainty creates unstoppable momentum. Discipline gets you moving, but purpose is what keeps you going long after the excitement fades. Anyone can force themselves to work hard for a day or a week, but sheer discipline without a deeper reason eventually burns out. The human mind can push through discomfort, but it cannot push through emptiness. When you understand why something matters, effort becomes meaningful. When you don't, effort becomes torture. Purpose turns hard things from something you force yourself to do into something you feel responsible to do. Most people struggle not because they lack strength, but because they lack connection. They try to build discipline without building meaning. They chase habits without knowing the future those habits are supposed to create. When you don't have a clear why, your brain sees effort as danger and comfort as safety. But when your why becomes strong enough, your brain begins to interpret effort as the path to survival. Suddenly, the discomfort that once felt unbearable becomes part of your mission. You're no longer doing the hard thing for the sake of the task. You're doing it for the sake of the person you're becoming. Purpose creates emotional endurance. When setbacks happen, purpose gives you patience. When you feel tired, purpose gives you reason. When doubt shows up, purpose gives you clarity. People who achieve extraordinary things aren't the ones who never struggle. They're the ones who stay connected to why the struggle is worth it. They aren't superhuman. They're simply aligned. And alignment is more powerful than motivation. Motivation changes. Alignment anchors. Purpose also shapes identity. When you know why your work matters, it becomes part of who you are. You don't see yourself as someone forcing discipline anymore. You see yourself as someone living with intention. That identity shifts your relationship with effort. You stop asking, do I feel like doing this today? And start thinking, this is what I do because this is who I am. Your brain thrives on identity-based consistency. When your actions match your purpose, resistance decreases and craving increases. You begin to want the challenges that move you closer to your vision. This connection to purpose also rewires how you see discomfort. Instead of interpreting it as pain, you interpret it as progress. Every difficult moment becomes proof that you are committed. Every challenge becomes evidence that you are moving forward. You start to feel proud of the struggle instead of ashamed of it. That pride creates momentum. Momentum turns into craving, and craving builds unstoppable discipline. Without purpose, you rely on willpower, and willpower is limited. With purpose, you rely on meaning, and meaning has no limit. Purpose carries you through the days when your energy is low, when your emotions are heavy, when your mind wants to quit. It gives you a future worth fighting for and a reason strong enough to override excuses. When you live with purpose, you don't fear hard things. You pursue them. Because deep down, you know they are shaping you into the person you're meant to become. When you understand how your mind works, everything changes. Hard things stop feeling like punishment and start feeling like opportunity. You stop fighting your brain and start training it. You build an identity that supports your goals instead of sabotaging them. You stack small wins until your mind learns to crave progress. You replace confusion with clarity and hesitation with action. And you anchor everything in a purpose strong enough to carry you through every moment of doubt. Growth is no longer something you chase in short bursts. It becomes the way you live, think, and show up every single day. You become someone who doesn't just do hard things, you become someone who thrives on them. Thank you for giving your time, your focus, and your energy to this message. I hope it sparks something powerful inside you, something that reminds you who you are and what you're capable of. Keep moving, keep showing up, and keep choosing the harder path that leads to the better version of you. Good luck on your journey, and thank you for listening.